highlight its approaches. Strategic Human Resource Management (SHRM). Um, See, globalization has put pressure on governments and businesses to carry out structural alteration or adjustments, diversify businesses, specialize process, optimize efficiency, sustain and augment productivity, maintain competitive edge, all in the face of increasing cost constraints. There is need for economical utilization of human capital through a right capacity building strategy for desired organizational performance to cut costs. Unplanned retrenchment of human resource has become a frequent, though by no means a desirable organizational practice. Strategy should be evolved to maximize the utility of the HR function. HRM management per se evolved to maximize the utility of the HR function. HRM management per se may not be targeted or specific enough to achieve desired accuracy of policy. For example, how targeted are employee benefit policies? What is the impact on productivity? What modifications are needed? Correlation based on empirical analysis would need to be drawn. Therefore, combining human capital regulation with overall business strategy, economizing operations to maximize efficiency is what is understood in common parlance as strategic human resource management. Strategic human resource management is relevant to all organizations, public or private, irrespective of form, hierarchy, or network fluid or command control, etc. SHRM has both policy and operative aspects. Understanding SHRM ranges from a reactive management field, where human resource management is a tool with which to implement a strategy, to a more proactive function in which HR activities can actually create and shape organizational strategy. Human resource management being an architect programs. Hence, SHRM is predicted on two fundamental assertions. First, an idea that an organization's human resource are of critical strategic importance, that the skills, behaviors, and interaction of employees have the potential to provide both the foundation for strategy formulation and the means of strategy implementation. Second, the belief that firms' HRM practices are instrumental in developing the strategic capability of its pool of human resource, Colbert, 2004. New perspectives continue to emerge on strategic human resource management, SHRM. The SHRM debate has progressed from considering how personal management differs from HRM to exploring how HR can lead to more sustainable competitive advantage. Strategic human resource management entails integrating HR practices with a discrete specific strategy formulation or articulated towards identified and intermediate and or mean or desired value through a hierarchic purposive behavior directed towards pursuit of final value or organizational goal through intermediate ends is perceived by Simon. Such end or intermediate end also mean is articulated academically, since public administration is cooperative, rational action and implemented through strategic decision making regarding, for instance, cost reduction or better public relations would form an identified end. Human resource practice would need to be weaved into organizational strategy and implemented by means of specific strategic strategies crafted towards identified end. Organizational functioning would thus proceed as a coherent linear with each sub policy integrally linked with overall policy till the objective is reached. SHRM is therefore contingent on identification of end, articulation of strategy, and integration of sub strategies into the whole, that is organizational policy. The important issue is to find ways of integrating HR strategy with organizational strategy to achieve desired economy in operations. Key concepts in strategic human resource management, therefore, are listed as aligning resources with strategic making strategies adaptable to new forces and new strategic directions, and periodic renewals of strategic human as well as organizational resources with a view to sustaining competitive advantage for the organization. Wide array of questions addressed in strategic human resource management are recounted as follows. Colbert, 2004. What is the effect of HR practice on the development of a firm? Human resources. Which HR practices lead to greater organizational performance? To what degree does that depend on a firm's strategy? How does it ensure that its individual HR practices fit with one another, or does fit at all matter in HR practice? And must the attributes of a firm's base of human resource always align with the priori strategy, or can its stock of skills, knowledge, and interactions drive strategic directions? SHRM is recognized as universal academic discipline currently in need of a theoretical framework to impart universality to its principles. Colbert 2004. The key constructs and central debates in SHRM, as discussed by Colbert 2004, have grown out of the above questions. Best practice versus fit, horizontal, vertical fit, fit versus flexibility, control, exerting versus creativity, enhancing aspects of HR systems, single dimensional and multi varied effects, and appropriate theoretical frames. This will be elaborated later. So, scope of strategic human resource management. The scope of activities and themes encompassed by SHRM is complex and goes beyond the responsibilities of personal or HR managers into all aspects of managing people. It focuses on management decision and behaviors used consciously or unconsciously to control, influence, and motivate those who work for the organization. In other words, it's human resource. Purcell 2001, Maybe, Salaman, and Story 1998 have studied the subject from four distinct perspectives. The social and economic context of SHRM, including factors in the internal, corporate, and external environment that influence the development and implementation of HR strategies. The correlation between SHRM and business performance, emphasizing the measurement of performance management style in the development of new forms of organization, and the relationship between SHRM and the development of organizational capability, particularly knowledge management. Before we move any further, it shall be better to understand fully the concept of strategy, because it is from here that the idea of strategic human resource management SHRM emerges. The concept of strategy. A strategy is a pattern or a plan that integrates an organization's major goal, policies, and action sequences in a coherent linear of decisions. A well formulated strategy helps allocate an organization's resources optimally into a unique and viable matrix based on relative internal competencies, shortcomings, anticipated changes in the. The concept of strategy is not a simple one. Strategy can have number of implications. It can be described either as a plan or a similar idea, direction, guide, course of action, or a pattern that provides for consistent behavior over time, or perspective on an organization's fundamental way of doing things, or play or apply or a specific maneuver intended to outwit an opponent of a competitor. Evolution of strategy is basically a military term. However, it is not this sense that it has implications of human resource management. It was Peter Drucker who pointed out the importance of strategic decisions in 1955 in his book The Practice of Management, in which he defined strategic decisions as all decisions on business objectives and on the means to reach them. However, the importance of the concept was not fully realized until pioneers like Alfred Chandler 1962 and Michael Porter 1980 developed what could be regarded as the classical approach. This involved the use of formal and system design techniques based on quantification, focused externally, and concentrated on long-term plans, not being much concerned with implementation, and also more or less ignoring the human element. Later, writers emphasize the human and qualitatively aspect of strategy. They saw strategy as essentially evolutionary, as revealed in organizational behavior as part of organizational process, rather than something endogenous or of external or formal design. Others developed the concepts of distinctive competencies and for resource-based strategy. More recently, academics have stressed both implementations as well as planning aspects of policy. This shift is in thinking has been from strategy to structure and systems to purpose, process, and people. It is the later development represented by this shift that represents the modern thinking on the subject. Chaffee 1985 considers that academically strategy is viewed in three distinct but sometimes conflicting ways, as linear strategy, adaptive strategy, and interpretative strategy. Linear strategy, the linear model, has been used by most researchers. It focuses on planning and forecasting of likely events. Sequence of events is traced through past and present activities to its logical culmination in the value or end to be achieved in the future. The end reached or desired is the organizational goal to be reached through a well-networked matrix of strategies and hierarchic purposive behavior in pursuance of it. Adaptive strategy. The second model is described as the adaptive strategy model and is most closely associated with the idea of strategic management. This model focuses on means and is largely concerned with achieving fit of strategy with respect to internal or external factors. Public and private organizations have to devise strategies to adjust to the changing variables in the environment to maintain organizational relevance and organizational efficiency expressed in favorable cost benefit ratio and effectiveness or internal and external equilibrium attained by adaptation on the to the external flux. An internal consistency of policies regarding motivation, inducement of employees towards willing cooperation, interpretive model represents a minority view. It sees strategy as a metaphor and therefore not as something measured or measurable, but rather as something perceived in qualitative terms. Strategy is the visible tip of iceberg representing the underlying factors or the underpinning theme of organizational philosophy. This concept is more purpose and culture, precisely or the organization's overall mode of functioning. There could be conflict between linear, adaptive, and interpretative concepts of strategy. Reconciliation may not always be practicable or possible in that short term, and long-term objectives may not always be congruent. Mintzberg 1998 has identified 10 schools of strategy research, which has developed since strategic management emerged as a field of study during the 1960s. The design school, where strategy is perceived as a process of conception through a choice. The planning school, whereby strategy is constitute a formal process and deliberate planned construct. Strategy making is put in temporal perspective in that it is seen as evolving gradually out of a series of steps. The positioning school, by which a strategy is perceived as an analytical process, contingency of situations is taken into account in framing suitable strategies. The entrepreneurial school, which looks upon strategy as a visionary process, there is a perception of the future and actual strategizing depends on assessment of vulnerability and feasible risk taking. The cognitive school, which opines that strategy is a mental process, it is conceived in the mind of the strategist, and the degree of success attained in practice depends on the quality or level of cognitive cognition of the individual strategist. Stress is unmistakably on the quality of views strategy as a process of negotiations resulting in an LCM, least common denominator, through interplay of relevant forces and factors where bargaining power of the interest or pressure groups is a factor of consequence. Participatory strategy is perceived as a dependent variable. The functioning of the enterprise and feasible under a given set of circumstances. The environmental school, which looks upon strategy as a reactive responsive to stimuli from the environment. Environment is an independent variable here, and strategy is dependent variable. The configuration school, whereby strategy is perceived as a process of transformation from the actual to the